Hello and welcome. I'm Masood Raja, and this is Raja Against the Machine, where I share my ideas and my thoughts about current climate of politics and culture in the United States and the world and in Pakistan. Today I'll briefly talk about a sort of a thing that I see as the crisis of Pakistani intellectual culture. And the reason I'm calling it a crisis is because I think because of certain things, the political and cultural thought in Pakistan is being unduly hampered. And because of that, what's coming out of Pakistan in scholarly works or even in journalistic works tend to be, if not simplistic, at least highly constrained. And I don't think so it's because Pakistani intellectuals and journalists are any less than their global counterparts. I think it's because they are working within very strictly defined, probably unannounced, but very well defined restrictions. And there are two that come to my mind. One, of course, is the power of the religious forces in the culture. And the other is the institutional power of certain institutions. So what the religious institutions, formal and informal, political parties, pressure groups, popular groups, because of their influence, there is so much of threat to free thinking or free expression of your ideas that people have kind of internalized that threat. And very rarely does someone speak in a vocabulary or in a language that could fall afoul of that constituency. And I think because of that, there are so many questions of equity and justice related to ethnic groups, religious sects that remain unasked. Because people who are concerned about these things know that if they venture into that territory, they will be entering a perilous terrain which can even sometimes end in drastic results for journalists as well as academics. And the second is the institutions. I don't need to name them, but there are powerful institutions in Pakistan which monitor speech. And then if they find that you have said something or written something that is slightly critical of them, there are consequences for you. The consequences could be a small warning or something drastic. Now, I'm not saying these people are sitting every day with journalists and intellectuals and telling them this is what you can do and this is what you cannot do. What happens is in a culture, in a living culture, people already see what are the threats to them and they internalize them. Now, what that does is when you have internalized these limits to your thought, then you have already trained yourself to think and express and write and speak within those restrictions. And sometimes you'll all even be unaware of that. So because of these restrictions, announced, unannounced, implemented, officially mandated, or unofficially, sanctioned, what's happening to thought, critical thought, writing, and critical journalism in Pakistan is that it just plays with certain tropes that are safe. And it only uses critique where they know that they can't fall afoul of these two large constituencies. So, for example, you'll see free speech to the point of absurdity when it comes to criticizing politicians because that is permitted. Right? You can take Nawaz Sharif to task, you can take Imran Khan to task, but you very rarely can talk really critically of a Maulvi or a religious scholar, right, or a military leader or someone like that. And that harms Pakistan even more because what happens then is that the figure of the politician and the political parties and politicians, since it's free to talk against them, become the ultimate target of derision and laughter. Now, I'm not saying that political parties should not be criticized, but when you take out these other constituencies and make them into something you don't talk about or you don't criticize, then ultimately the very system upon which democracy relies becomes the target. So these are some of my thoughts. I mean, I could be absolutely wrong, and you're free to correct me in the comments, but from an outside observer point of view, someone who lives abroad but is also committed to Pakistan and in touch with a lot of Pakistanis, I see that as something that is not in the best interest of Pakistan. When thought is controlled indirectly or directly, and when people are afraid of asking critical questions, questions that they ask everywhere in the bazaars, in the streets, but not formally in a paper or in a newspaper article, then that enervates the public discourse. And in a democracy, if the public discourse is weakened and it's, made into just like a slightly perilous path of discussion and discourse, then you cannot build or create a thriving critical culture. And if you don't create a thriving critical culture, especially in writing, journalistic or academic, then the overall culture of thought and criticism and intellectual maturity and political maturity does not really emerge. So these are like some of my thoughts. Now, I can't go into like the intricacies of how it came to be. Maybe I'll do another video on it. But I would like to end with an example. Now, I have gone to quite a few conferences in Pakistan, and Pakistani media and academics love Arundhati Roy. Right? She's invited to give talks. She's invited to give virtual talks. And what they love about her is that she openly criticizes Indian policy, and somehow a lot of people in Pakistan believe as if she is anti-India. The distinction that they fail to make is that Arundhati Roy at the end of the day is an Indian citizen. But she lives in a democracy where she absolutely can exercise her right to criticize Indian state institutions and their actions, even to the audiences of a so-called belligerent country, without getting in trouble with the state. Now with, current political party in power and others, of course, she can get in trouble, but she has the constitutional right to do so, and she does that. That should teach Pakistanis something about freedom of expression. Think of it this way. What if Masood Raja went on an Indian TV network and offered a just critique of any system in Pakistan? Will you be able to accept it? Or will you start calling him a traitor and all that? If your answer is the latter, then the question for you to ask is, why can't we have a culture in which people can have differences of opinion, can even criticize the nation, its founding principles, how it works, because that's how you make a nation better, and still be considered loyal citizens of the state? And I think the reason that doesn't happen is because the way the intellectual culture is built, the way the journalistic culture is constrained, that kind of thought is considered dangerous, right? And it's considered impermissible, right? So because of these two powerful constituencies trying to control thought and its expression, we have created a culture in which even expressing such thoughts has become intolerable. And there are a lot of young scholars who want to say brilliant things, who want to say deeply critical things, but at the back of their mind, whether perceptibly or imperceptibly, they've internalized this idea that this is the place I cannot go. This is something I cannot say. And when you build an intellectual culture on that, all you then get is people writing safe stories and safe materials and, safe dissertations. So this is something to think about. If you think I'm wrong, please do let me know. But if you would like to put me wise and amplify this or point to some complexities that I've missed, I would be more than happy to hear from you. That's all I have today. Thank you so much for being a part of, my life, and by supporting me by coming to this channel and watching these videos. Please continue to do so. And I will come back with some more thoughts about politics and culture of United States, Pakistan, or the world. Sky is the limit. Until then, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and as always, from me to you, peace and love.